So I want to talk a little bit about controlling your camera, and to do that I have a scene set up here, which is just the base model that I used for pretty much every shot, and just talk a little bit about how I control the camera when I'm working on things. So to do that, I'm first going to create a camera, and if you look at it, when you create the camera, it sort of aligns to your view. So if you find that annoying, you can hit Alt-R to reset the rotation, and then you could bring it up and rotate it 90 degrees on the x-axis, for example, to get sort of a nice front view from whatever you're doing. Now, before I get into this, I want to talk a little bit about the Passepartout over here, which is a really interesting feature. You can turn it off and on, and the thing that I like about it is that you can actually set it quite high. So when you're working on trying to find a good shot, if you set this up quite high, you've got a way better idea of what you're doing and what you're actually seeing in the camera. Now, that being said, let's talk a little bit about how to control this camera. So if I hit the G key, I can just move the camera around in its sort of local space, which is really handy. And you can sort of look around with what you're doing with the camera in mind. Now, this is good for a couple of things, but what if you want to zoom in and out quite quickly? Well, if we hit the, well, actually not zoom, I guess a dolly would be the correct term, because if we're zooming, we're actually going to change the focal length, which I'll talk about in just a second. So if I hit G and the Z key twice, not the X key, but the Z key twice, then I can move forward and backward quite easy, which means I can dolly the camera in whatever position it's in. So that means, let's say I'm going to go out of my camera here, and I want to position it over here. I can hit Control Alt 0, and my camera's positioned. If I hit G, Z, and Z again to move the camera in its local Z axis, then I can move in and out as well. So this is awesome because it allows you to get shots really quickly. And again, by using G, by just grabbing the camera and moving it around, we can pan it around a little bit. Now, if you want slightly more granular control over that pan, if you hit G and then Shift Z twice, then you get the camera moving along its local axes in the X and Y axis. Now, this is really nice as well. If you hold down Shift, you can hold down, you can change the speed of the movement as well. So you've got a lot of options to move your camera around already. Now, I use these almost every day just to get shots right and get them into position. Now, another thing which is really handy to use is this lock camera to view button. If we hit this, then now our camera will actually be locked to our view. So in my case, I've got my rotation set to rotate around my selected object. I actually say, okay, I really want to focus on his face here. I'm going to select his face and I can move the camera around like this. That way I can bring in the shot and really have a nice sort of looking shot and experiment with this and just kind of do whatever I want and try things out very quickly. Now, another thing that I've personally noticed that I like to use quite a bit is, let's say we want to have sort of this in the middle, but we want to have an off-axis shot. What do I mean by that? I don't want it all straight and straight. What I can do is if we go into the input, then we could change the orbit style to trackball. And that means that rather than turning around the object in a certain manner, we can now turn it around like it's a trackball. So if you're moving your mouse around, and I still have that face selected in the middle of your screen, you can see it turns around sort of like a trackball. Think of those really old trackball mice with the ball in the middle of them. And if I move more to the side of my viewport over here, I actually move it in a motion like this. So this allows me to get really interesting shots really quickly. Let's say I grab this and I sort of want a really cool shot from this angle. You can do it way quicker in the trackball style orbiting, and you can switch between the two, which is awesome, by just switching between turntable and trackball. This is something I use quite a bit as well, because it allows you to get in there really closely and maybe get shots that you didn't think of before with just using the turntable method. Now, a second thing that's really important is if I select this camera again, something that I see happen a lot, especially with people that are just starting out with Blender, is that they use the default, the default focal length of the camera that was created. Now, a 35mm lens is quite wide, so you can't really get to see everything that you want to see. And I'm actually going to pin this over here so we can see what we're doing. And if you want to get those really And if you want to get those really close, sort of very tight shots where you feel like you're very close to everything, then increasing the focal length can definitely be a really good thing to do. Now, let's say if I increase this to 70, you can see the background is sort of flattened out a little bit. And if we use this in combination with our depth of field, then we can get some really interesting shots really quickly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn on the viewport depth of field over here and set it to high quality. And I'm going to turn it on in the viewport itself as well. And what you can do to get a really quick distance from the camera rather than using a focus object is hit the E key, click wherever you want to click. And now if we bring down the f-stop, for example, I'm going to bring it down very extreme, and you can see we just have this part in focus. So by using all these tricks together, you can get really cool results very quickly, and you can iterate these shots one after the other by saving your project and just hitting save as and doing the next shot. So this is becoming sort of more of an interesting shot, and then you could even mess around with just moving around the camera to get an idea of what kind of movement you want when you start animating it. So I like to iterate like this extremely quickly, which is nice. And play around with all these things, like play around with the focal length. Don't just be happy with the focal length that it gives you. In pretty much any movie that you'll ever watch, focal length is used to create different types of emotion during scenes, is used to tell you different things when you're looking at the image in a movie itself. So generally, if you have a focal length that's lower than 50, you've got a wide angle lens, which means you're trying to convey a lot of information at once. You're trying to show as much as you can in one go. If you have a larger focal length than 50 millimeters, then let's say, for example, like the 70 millimeters or 85 millimeters or even higher, you're very zoomed in, but it means that you're getting very intimate with your subject. So you're telling the story of being very close to something, maybe having something look a lot smaller than it really is, or having something look a lot more zoomed in than it really is. Like I said, these are all tools in your toolbox, so just use them. Don't be afraid to mess with them. And don't be afraid to try this depth of field stuff in your viewport already, because you can get some really cool results. Now, the annoying thing is if you're to zoom out the depth of field, because it's linked to the distance, it's unfortunate because you have to adjust the distance, so hit E again and then click wherever you want to click. But if you want to use this, for example, on an object, you can hit E as well. Click on the object, and now that object will always be in focus. Now, I don't know which one exactly it is, but don't forget, it actually uses the, I believe it uses the origin of the object to set the focal point. And as you can see, if your origins aren't set up correctly, you're gonna get some really weird results. I know this is happening because my origins are at the very bottom here. There you go. It's at 000 because I reset the whole thing before I started using this file. So you can just delete this, hit the distance again, and again, you'll have what you need. So I hope this is a little bit of an introduction to how to use your camera more effectively to tell the story that you want to tell with it.